Hello, welcome to the Queen of Hearts. Today I'm here to talk to you about Margot Robbie. Now, she was the actress in the recent Barbie movie. Now, I am not a Barbie fan. I haven't been a Barbie fan since my late tweens. I remember selling my Barbies for, I don't know, like $100 in the trading post or something like that, and dyeing their hair like ridiculous colors. The reason I am actually exploring this is because one of my students, thank you to Elle, who actually brought this up with me, she wanted to look at this chart because she was reading an interview about Margot, and Margot said that she doesn't identify with being a Cancerian at all, and she said she feels more like a Gemini. And I think that's really interesting. So I wanted to start by looking at that, and then look into her birth chart and a number of different Time Lord techniques and solar return charts to see what is going on. How come this person has just made $12.5 million for a movie? Is she lucky? Is her birth chart great? Like, what does it say? So let me just get started. I'm going to start sharing this. This is going to be a longer presentation, so I'm going to try and not be a mad perfectionist and just get it out. Thanks for your patience. So this is her natal chart. Now, I'm using Regiomontanus as a house system, which is one of the many. I like this one, and as one of my my teachers, Will Morris, said, using the house system that best answers the question at hand. So this is the one that I like the best for this particular purpose. Now, Margot was born on the 2nd of July, 1990. I've got a birth time of 7:45 a.m., which gives her 23 degrees of Cancer rising. And the moon is in Scorpio, ruling that ascendant, and the sun is at 9 degrees of Cancer. So it's interesting straight away to just consider, okay, this person's got an ascendant and 3 planets in Cancer, yet they don't identify with the sign of Cancer. Why is that? I mean, I think that's really interesting. And I'm sure that some of you out there might feel the same way. You're like, well, this is my sun sign, or, apparently I'm a this rising sign. I just don't feel like it. Now, remember that the chart is a very complicated tapestry, and really to understand it thoroughly, you need to take a lot of different things into account. And so in this case, we can see, yes, there is a Cancer rising, which is generally, going to express traits of sensitivity and compassion, and someone who might be quite nostalgic, maybe very connected to family, protective, etc. But this person says that they don't feel those things, or they don't necessarily connect to the essential qualities of Cancer. So why not? Now, there's a few reasons. The first one I will say is that we have Cancer being ruled by the moon, and the moon in this chart is in Scorpio. So traditionally speaking, that moon is in its sign of fall. Now, it's classified as fall because the moon is opposite the sign of its exaltation. Now, when a planet's in fall, it's out of its territory, okay? The moon doesn't feel moony, doesn't feel like it can tap into those essential lunar qualities because it's in a different territory. This moon in her chart is actually in Mars territory by being in Scorpio, okay? Because Mars is the ruler of Scorpio here. So this moon is going to move her forward in life. This is her ascendant ruler. So this is going to be about, the vehicle in which she propels herself through life, and the story of her life, as the moon is the general indicator of events and of our passageway through time. But this moon is kind of like a bit of a little bit more topsy-turvy. It isn't as inclined to coming together or sensitivity. It's more inclined to things being turned upside down, like chaos, or she could be more motivated by a drive within her, a drive for international recognition, or to be a hard worker, Now, the reason I'm saying this is because the ruler of Scorpio, which is Mars, is in the ninth house in this chart, and it's in very strong condition. So Mars is in its home sign of Aries, where it's really powerful. Okay, so this gives someone who is really like willful. They're passionate. They're strong. They're not going to give up, you know. But they're not. This is not the expression of lunar quality. This is a warrior quality. You know, this is someone who's doing movies that actually, while coming across perhaps as superficial, actually have got an undercurrent that cuts through to deeper topics, you know, because Mars is all about cutting. It's about separating. It's about, and so that's interesting too. So she is less inclined to necessarily just tap into the emotional realm and go with that, because she's operating from Mars territory. Now, Mars being in the ninth house is why I was mentioning international and foreign affairs, you know, global films and things, you know, definitely fall into the ninth house. Now, the other thing that's very interesting when we start to talk about her character and who she identifies as, the other very important part we look at is the sun. Now, the sun is our core identity. It is our vitality. Now, in astrology, when we find the sun in the 12th house, and I've got that in my chart too, you know, this individual might want to be behind the scenes. You know, it might, even though they get thrust out into the limelight or whatever, you know, she may have a part of her which remains private and hidden. You know, the 12th house is the house of hidden things, and having both the sun and Mercury, which is about her communication and the way that she's interacting and thinking and delineating things in the world, both in the 12th house, you know, there is a certain reserve or privacy that she probably doesn't share in terms of her public persona. And so it makes a lot of sense when we see her public area. Now, this 10th house rules the public persona. It rules her success. It rules her career. And we've got Venus there. So Venus rules Taurus. Okay, Taurus is right here. And Venus is in Gemini. And so she said she identifies as a Gemini. She feels like a bit more like a Gemini. And that's probably or possibly because she's connecting in with, you know, that character. She's connecting in with the career. She's tapping into the 10th house. And so she's feeling or becoming a product of that social the social aspect of her, you know. And it's interesting too that she played Barbie, because, you know, Venus is all about women. It's a significator of women. But in Gemini, it's kind of got that sort of light, fluffy, you know, playful tone. And so Venus in Gemini would be a great place for someone who's going to play Barbie and get paid $12.5 million to do so. I think that 12.5 million might have something to do with this Jupiter, which is in incredible shape. And I think this is the final piece of the puzzle. You know, when we look at the angles on this chart, angles which include our ascendant, our descendant, our IC, which is the root of the chart, and our MC, these angles, any planets placed within 5 degrees of these angles are turned up in terms of volume and in terms of, you know, being active in the life. And so Jupiter is exalted, so it's very strong. This is a placement of kings or royals or people who are held in high esteem, you know, people who might be famous, people who are known to be generous and kind and benevolent, and that comes naturally to her. So it's possible that while she doesn't identify with the more kind of sensitive or, I don't know, Cancerian qualities, she may identify with the Jupiterian qualities, you know, instead. So that's possible. The other things to mention are Saturn and Pluto both form aspects to that ascendant. Okay, Pluto is forming a rather wide but still a trine to that. So that's going to add, you know, a tone to the character, a tone to the personality. Someone who's more heavy hitting, someone who might be probing the deeper aspects of life. You know, someone who might struggle occasionally, or bring up Plutonian topics and be involved in transforming the root, which is down here. This could be transforming her family life, transforming her home life, transforming, in terms of the fourth house being connected to the country, like having far-reaching transformational capacity for the society in which we live. That's possible. And I guess you wouldn't think that would come from a Barbie movie, but I've heard from people that I know who've watched it, and I haven't watched it yet, actually, which is full disclosure. But it's more than, it's more than just a light fluffy thing. It brings up deeper topics. So yeah, when we see Pluto in aspect to the ascendant, this person is someone who has got a deeper, more probing, maybe a purpose here that's connected to transformation and some challenging topics. Now also, and very importantly, we see Saturn strongly opposing the ascendant. Now Saturn is going to add incredible work ethic. This Saturn also describes her partner, which I took a guess at actually, but her partner is described as Saturn because Saturn's the ruler of the seventh house, and it's in Capricorn, which is another planet in its home sign. And so this is very strong, admittedly retrograde. And I was thinking to myself, is her partner a bit older? Like, is he a tycoon or some kind of, business person or whatever? And he is. Yeah, I think he has some kind of, entertainment business or something like that. So yeah, he is really part of her success, and I'm sure, he is an anchor in that. And I'm sure providing challenge because he's shooting an oppositional ray to her ascendant. But the thing that's really important to remember when we're looking at charts is we need to remember the concept of sect. Now, sect is a traditional concept. I'm just going to sit up a bit. Sect is a traditional concept which divides charts into day charts and night charts. Now, we can see here, she's born at 7:45 in the morning, but the sun is above the degree of the ascendant, and therefore this is a day chart. And so what that does is we then know we have a team of day planets. Okay, this is our sect team for the day, of which Jupiter is the fortune planet connected to the day. Now that makes this Jupiter even more capable of helping her out, of bringing good fortune to her life, and also to making her kind of attract good luck. Jupiter is also in its own term, which further strengthens her capacity and the support she receives out in the world, from others. And while Saturn can provide, maybe a restraining aspect, that might not be so bad. I know that oppositions are challenging aspects, but, this Jupiter, which is definitely prone to expansion and growth, and maybe not necessarily knowing the limit, like it might just want to keep spreading out, like Jupiter in Cancer. It's like, pouring a magical potion all over the floor or something like that. It just spreads out until the water can't go any further. This Saturn is the restraining aspect, the controlling, containing aspect, which, it's probably going to have the polarity of positive and negative there. But Jupiter does sometimes benefit from a bit of restraint. I'm just going to get a little bit of water. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it off in terms of the natal chart. Yeah. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to explore here was I wanted to mention, before we go into the solar return charts, I wanted to mention that she is, in terms of secondary progressions, for people who use secondary progressions, she is not quite at a full moon secondary progress moon. So she's heading up to that point. So she's really approaching that prime time, in terms of that symbolic timing. And so the other thing with all of these is that, we've got to take into account the natal chart conditions, which will tell us how things tend to end up. It'll tell us, how is this set up, but the secondary progressions are going to tell us, like, is this the season for it? You know, is this the season for her to become really big, or is she actually in a winding down, emptying out season? But in her case, she's in a waxing moon, like heading towards full moon. So she's really in prime time to start reaping those rewards for all the hard work she's put in. Now, let's take a quick look here as well. I'm going to show you the solar return chart for the year before the movie was released. Let me make sure this is the one. Yeah, so the movie was released on the 21st of July. That's in America. Now, so this is therefore the solar return for the year before. And I just want to show you some interesting things that kind of repeat in terms of the natal chart. We see Mars very close to the degree of natal Mars, and Mars is on the ascendant in this chart, which is really interesting. Again, in domicile, very strong. This unlocks the promise of being able to tap into those resources, especially in terms of foreign affairs and foreign matters. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is we see Pluto. She's got a Mars-Pluto square in this solar return. Now, I don't look at solar returns on their own, actually. I usually look at them with the natal chart, but I just thought I would mention that because that is a huge volcanic interaction of energy here. So she's got like a fire in her belly, ready to like just go. I mean, that Pluto is on the cusp of the 10th house, on the MC. It's like time, like she's bursting to just get this done. Now, admittedly, you know, this could be, I don't know, very taxing, but her vitality is incredibly strong because we look at the ascendant ruler, it's Mars in Aries. And it's square Pluto, like nothing can stop her really. So I can't see that this is going to really like wear her out. The moon is also in an angular house. It is actually trining her natal moon in Scorpio, albeit separating aspect. So there's lots of connections here. I want to share with you her natal chart so you can see them together. Just show you side by side. All right, this is the natal chart on the left and this is the solar return on the right. Now, what's interesting is we see Mars on the ascendant. I mean, that is just dynamic, powerful energy. And she can back it up because the natal chart has got the capacity. That's where we see, you know, is that seed already planted in the garden? Like, can this person access that energy? And she totally can. And so it's coming up in the area of foreign things. It's coming up and it's coming to her. Like, these opportunities are really coming to her. Now, in the solar return, we see that that's other people's money coming to her because it's the ruler of the 8th house of other people's money. Now, interestingly, her money, which is the 2nd house in the solar, has actually got the fixed star Algol on the cusp. So, I mean, this is potentially a sign of overwhelm, you know, like, I don't know, like to think you're going to get paid $12.5 million is probably likely to, you know, sever your head in some way, like put your head in the clouds. Our goal is a fixed star of connected to the Medusa's head, you know, and it's got connections to symbolically connected to beheading. And so, you know, that is interesting that fixed star is on her 2nd house in the solar return. What else do we have? We have a couple of other really interesting things. Now, when we look back at the natal chart, which we always need to refer to when we look at solar returns, we know that Venus is the planet that speaks to her career and her reputation and her public persona, and that Venus is natally in Gemini at 8 degrees. Now, in the solar return, we see Venus returning to a home sign, which is like ringing a bell and saying, yes, you know, this time is now, like it's time for you to reap the rewards. And those rewards are likely to be financial because Venus is in the 2nd house in the solar return. So we're seeing a connection between the 11th house, which is where Venus is natally, okay, the ruler of her career is in the 11th, which is all about the audience, okay, it's about hopes and wishes, and it's about that her alliances, like people who are backing her up. And we see Venus returning back to that place. The other thing that's interesting is not just is it landing in the house of her resources, but this is a night chart, the solar return. And so therefore Venus is the fortune or the benefic of the nighttime sect, okay? And we see that Venus is in the nighttime part of the chart. So this is actually the strongest planet in this solar return. So it's really, really activating well. Now we also see Mercury incredibly strong here. And this is something that is not present in the natal chart. Her Mercury is actually combust. Some astrologers may be very kind and say that's cazimi, all these words, but in a nutshell, generally when a planet is close to the sun, it is compromised, and it can indicate overwhelm, or it can indicate low vitality, all the things that this planet's trying to get across, like Mercury, could be somehow compromised. But the thing that's really interesting in this solar return year is that Mercury, which is all about communication, and it's about getting your message across, being understood, and understanding, that's in its home domicile of Gemini. And so that makes sense that that's important in the year where she's going to be doing a movie. She's going to have to remember lines, and she's going to have to do a lot of talking and presenting and things. So Mercury comes to the cusp of the third house. If we're allowing our 5-degree rule, which is the house of communication, Mercury is in domicile, and it's in the natal 11th house, which is again connected to the audience and co-present with Venus, which is the fortune planet. So this is all looking really good. Incredibly busy and perhaps stressful, yes, but nonetheless, she's doing well. What else do we have? We have the moon, which is always important to see. Like I said, it's in an angular house. So it's in the 4th house, which is connected to home and living situation. Now, I bet she wasn't at home much. Moon is square to natal moon, which can be, sometimes bring up some challenges in regard to kind of feelings of nurturing or safety. She might have, there's just a lot of change, a lot of busyness happening here. Now, and the other thing that's really interesting, and this one, I'm curious how other people would like to interpret this, but the moon in the solar return is on the degree of the south node in the natal chart. And so this interests me because I feel like, the moon essentially for this person is the descriptor of her in life, okay, because the moon rules her ascendant. Now, when the moon in the solar return comes to the south node, which is like that cavity or like that gaping part that just eats things, it's sort of like that eject button, like it's that release, it's the falling down, the letting go, it's reducing whatever it touches it. And that makes me think, I wonder, perhaps that's why she feels even less lunar, because the moon is like literally there. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, maybe there was something she had to give up in order to do this movie. Like maybe she had to give up her house. Maybe she had to sacrifice something connected to her family, or let go of something really deep, because that moon's in the 4th house, right up there, in alignment with the south node, which is rather challenging. Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. That remember, this year is the prelude of the year that the actual movie is released. So we do see that Pluto is right on the MC. So there's this is powerful energy. And then the ruler of the 10th house is that Saturn, which is also in its own sign, but it's retrograde. So I mean, perhaps there were delays, or perhaps there were some interruptions, but generally speaking, the plan was made and it was followed through to kind of get that movie out there. Now, I think it's important I'm going to take you back to the main screen. And I want to share with you the solar return for this year, okay, based on the release of the movie. Okay, so where are we? So this is her solar return for 2023 to 2024. And the movie came out on the 21st in America, so that's the 22nd in Australia. So I will actually show you a bi-wheel later on her with her natal chart. Now, this is a really interesting solar return. We'll have a quick look at it first on its own, and then we'll do it in a two-wheel series with the other. So what do we see? We see Cancer rising. Now, if we think back to her natal chart, she's got a Cancer rising. So when we see repetition like that in our solar returns, we know that this is going to be an important year for unlocking her natal promise, unlocking the contents of what is due to her in this lifetime. So that's very interesting. Now, we also have got Mercury, which is our planet of communication and expression, right on the ascendant in the solar return. Now, Mercury is ruling the 12th house. And so, this is interesting because the 12th house can have some less than shiny significations. It can be about self-undoing or, making errors or, perhaps enemies, like people or things that are like affecting our success. But I think in this case, I think it's a huge year for her. We really do have to look at the ruler of the ascendant to see what actually goes on and what type of area of life does she lean into. And here we've got the moon in Sagittarius in the 5th house, which is connected to entertainment. It's connected to pleasures. And it's on the cusp of the 6th. Remember, we apply a 5-degree rule. So effectively that moon's in the 6th house, which is, I think this indicates like a lot of work, like hard slog, the strain of really just pushing it and maybe it just feeling like a lot of a lot of pressure perhaps. Especially because that moon is applying to Mars, but it also applies to Venus first. So it's a mixed bag, and it's not a square, but it's sort of like there's a lot going on. And in a way, the 6th house is the house that connects to, being of service, but also of servitude. So it's like now she's got this movie out. She's got to do all the groundwork and all the like nitty gritty like stuff she might not want to do in order to kind of back it up. So yeah, let's look at this. I prefer looking at it with the natal chart together. And so we'll do that again. Margot, here we are. Okay. Again, left chart, natal chart, right chart, solar return chart for 2023 to 2024. So this one's just a freshie. It's just started. But this is the one that's going to be involved in the launch, okay? Now, I think this is fascinating, personally, for a number of reasons, because remember that her fortune planet, her benefic, is Jupiter, okay? It's the key planet. Now, Jupiter in the solar return is up here in the 10th house of public reputation and success. Admittedly, it's not in like excellent condition, astrologically speaking, in terms of its planetary placement in Taurus, but it's incredibly angular. Okay, so it's only like 8 degrees off the MC. It's with the North Node, which can be inclined to suggest things that grow or explode and increase. And this shows the movie kind of going gangbusters in a way. Showing that that with that North Node right on the MC point there. Showing the real potential for that to grow and to become, a force there. Now, the other thing that's really cool I wanted to mention is she's 33. Okay, she just turned 33 on the 2nd of July, and that puts her into a 10th house profection year. Now, profections are a system where we divide the chart into one house per year of life, and so by the time you get to 33 years of age, you enter into a 10th house profection year. Okay, and what that does is that activates the topic of career, reputation, success, and public persona. So 10th house topics are activated for her this year, and what a great year to actually be launching a movie. So it's really on point. And it activates in her chart Venus as the ruler of the year, and Venus is over here in the 11th house of the audience natally, so it's going to be bringing up that. But also we know that Venus is landing in the 2nd house of the solar return. Okay, and we see, because it's a repetition of ascendants here, so this is really unlocking her purpose in life. Venus comes to the cusp of the 2nd house. Now this is her house of resources, so yeah, she is going to get money. And you know what, it's interesting that it's a lot of money, like, because you know, we see Venus is closely square Uranus, and Uranus is right there on the cusp of the 11th house. And it's with Algol again. We're seeing that Medusa's head point there, 26 degrees of Taurus. So, you know, how we interpret this is really interesting. I guess there could be some degree of, you know, how do you even process that much, the idea of that much money? I think that, you know, the concept of fame and of being received by, you know, the audience. And, you know, I'm sure there are less than, there are some less than ideal folk, you know, that could be hanging around in the social circles in the 11th house as well. So this Algol point here could indicate, you know, the industry in which she's kind of needing to exist now. You know, she's taken the money, and, you know, on some level, you know, people could infer, you know, it's like selling your soul to, but I don't know. I think hopefully it's got good indications, the movie itself. But yeah, the ruler of the 11th house is in the 2nd house of resources, but our goal is on the cusp. So yeah, you make of that what you will. I think that huge quantities of money can definitely lead to people losing touch with reality, or feeling cut off from, you know, being like normal humans. Venus is square Uranus again, which brings like a shock, or brings some type of interesting change to her public reputation. I think this just indicates like overnight success, you know, like sudden, quick, boom, you've just made that much money. So that's really, really interesting. What else do we have? I mean, the fact that nodal axis is straddling the MCIC point is very interesting. So it looks like, you know, there's a lot of growth and expansion into career, but there is a release, or a letting go, or an emptying out in the sector connected with the home and living situation, the parents, perhaps the father. I mean, maybe there's a further cutoff there. The other thing that's fascinating, actually, is that the natal moon lands on that degree of the south node. And so this could bring, you know, perhaps a sort of emptying out emotionally. Like maybe I'm just inferring, because I've never been a successful actress like that, but I mean, putting the moon into the south node, this is a similar theme as what we saw the previous year. It sort of indicates to me, you know, where we saw the previous solar return, we saw we saw the moon in the south node as well. So we're seeing a repetition here. The moon is in the south node again. So it's like, it's almost like part of her has to sacrifice her emotional needs for this. Like she can't be fully complicit in her own, you know, she has to fit in with other habits, other people's routines, other, you know, it's like there is some potential for emotional emptying out, you know, maybe, yeah, that's just fascinates me. So I'd be curious to hear what other astrologers would say about that, but I think it's especially auspicious place to see the natal moon in the south node. I do think, especially connected to her home and living situation, and her issues with her father, even her own sort of sense of self may, you know, or her sense of physical embodiment, like the moon is very much connected to our health and our physical embodiment. It's like, yeah, all of that is taking a second step, as opposed to the out in the world part of her. And remember that natally too, like the moon and in the solar, the moon rules her. And so it's not like the moon's on the cusp of the 6th house, which could indicate illness, or it could indicate overworking or stress, or, doing it for everybody else. But thankfully, the moon does apply to trine Venus. So it's almost like, taking the good with the bad. You have a lot of work, but she also gets a lot of money. Venus is in a sign of the sun, again connected to fame and reputation. And Venus is applying to Mars. And remember that Mars is in Leo, which is trine to natal Mars. So again, this is all tying together. And this lands, if we're using a quadrant system, in her 1st house. So these things coming to her, money's coming to her, and the efforts and the rewards of her labor are coming to her. So yeah, I just want to see if there's anything else to mention in this solar return. This Mercury, actually, I was saying it was on the ascendant, but it's effectively not 5 degrees. So therefore it's still in the 12th house. Yeah, I'm curious about that Mercury in the 12th house. Now, Mercury can represent other people, like younger people, sometimes children. It can represent agents. It can represent like finance, brokers, and that kind of thing, because it's got a mercantile connection to resources. I wonder if there's some kind of dodgy, undercurrent going on with someone who's supposed to be like her spokesperson. It could be someone like that as well, someone who's a spokesperson for her, or maybe some press or some affiliates, a little bit of a low life. Mercury's ruling the 12th in both houses, in both charts, and Mercury's in the 12th in both charts. And Mercury is combust as well in both charts. Now, again, different astrological traditions or different periods would suggest Cazimi happens at different points. This one's less than a degree, so perhaps Mercury is just incredibly strong there, which indicates, benefits to or benefits the communication and benefits the mental processing, but I don't think so in the 12th house. It certainly isn't a good house. We also see, I think I want to show you the transit chart. Now, this is what I find incredibly interesting, to see the date of the launch of the Barbie movie. This is not the one. This is the one. Okay, so I'm just going to do a bi-wheel. Okay, so excuse me. Okay. Okay, I thought my coughing was just about done, and now it's coming back. Okay, right, let's go and check this out. So I want to take this back to the 22nd here in Australia. Now, I don't know what time this launched. I might just say midday. I don't think movies launch at midday, but let's just say it was midday. To give us an idea, we're not going to be spot on with the moon, but we'll get most of the other things in place. Okay, so this is the chart for the 22nd of July, which is the 21st in North America. And this is going to be connecting in with what is happening in her natal chart, okay? Now, the thing that's the most poignant for me is that, remembering she's in a 10th house profection, which is the activation of the 10th house of career and of fame. Now, this is going to be highlighting all these topics. It's going to be activating Venus as the ruler of the year, because Venus rules the 10th house. Okay. Now, natally, Venus is in the 11th house in Gemini, and that's the house that's connected to the audience. It's connected to hopes and wishes coming true. It's connected to feminine energy and women, and the Barbie movie really does capture that. But what is most interesting is that Jupiter is coming to, or has come to, the MC. Now, that brings good fortune, because in her natal chart, Jupiter is incredibly well placed. Okay, Jupiter is in Cancer, and here it's actually making a sextile, so it's able to see natal Jupiter, and that is really gorgeous. And yeah, that is an auspicious thing to see. Now, the thing is, one of my teachers actually was telling me, and I think it was Will Morris again, he was saying that looking at success and looking at career success and eminence, we look at the cycles of Saturn and Jupiter. And I think this is a Vedic astrology technique, but looking at when these planets reach the top of the chart, especially. So when Jupiter is down here in the gallows, in the low part of the chart, it's really beginning, it's really not as, it's not as fortunate, it's not as able to create that success, but as it moves up into the top part of the chart and then up to the MC, this is when we would hope to see or expect to see fortune, expect to see career matters working out. Now, because she's got a natal Jupiter that is so good, that really helps as well. And it is interesting, I'm sure this is not the launch time exactly, but having the MC on the degree, like this is the transiting chart on the outside, but having the transiting MC on the degree of her natal Jupiter is incredibly, interesting. Not to mention the sun coming to the first house. So the sun has got, the transiting sun, it's got affiliations with fame, with authority, with being someone that people look up to, and so that sun is coming to her, and it's kind of showtime, Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a few hours earlier, because I would probably expect to see that moon applying to Jupiter, although it could just still be, it could be a separating aspect, but the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, or it has made a trine to Jupiter and is separating. Now, this is nice because this indicates success, and it indicates the payout of success too, because the moon is transiting the second house. And it is trining Jupiter, which is lovely. Now, what else? And it's actually a grand trine. If you look, you can see it's interesting. It's actually tying into her natal Neptune. Now, this moon Neptune Jupiter thing really talks about like the film industry, like putting on a character, the concept of fame, but also the smoke and mirrors that come with it. And so that paying off for her at this point, with Jupiter trining Neptune there. It's interesting. I'm sure it's been hard work, but she's got that really driven Mars that can bring it home. So yeah, this is a really interesting chart. A lot of action. Remember, Venus is her time lord of in terms of profections. And her Venus is at 28 degrees of Leo on the day of the movie launch, and that's looking at natal Mars as well. So there's a trine between Venus and Mars, which is really propulsion of like, boom, pushed out into the limelight. And Venus is effectively in the second house, so it's like, again, here's your money. I wonder if she'll spend it quick though, because you can see Mars in the second house often does indicate, cashing it out as quickly as you get it. But I mean, that's a lot of money to spend. And I mean, Mars is in a more thrifty sign, being in Virgo. So perhaps, that's not such a big deal. But symbolically, it is also interesting because the sun is the ruler of the second house of resources, and that second house is on the ascendant or in the first house here. So that means resources coming to Margot. So I think that will do it for now. I hope that was interesting for you. I'm going to stop sharing this. Yeah, please feel free to ask me any questions. These videos are going to vary in terms of, the different techniques, and some of them are going to be more suitable for intermediate astrologers or people who have studied a fair bit of traditional astrology. For other videos, I'm going to try and make some more beginner videos as well, so that you can follow along and start to understand the building blocks of astrology. And if you've got any requests, things that you would like me to cover off, if anything popular comes up that is really interesting, I think I should definitely keep a close ear out for suggestions from my students, because they do bring up some really awesome chart examples. And yeah, this Barbie chart was not what I was expecting. But as you can see, and just to round it out, Margot has got a very auspicious natal chart. Admittedly, there is a lot of dynamic energy, a lot of angular planets, but they are well placed, by essential dignity, by bound rulership, and it really does demonstrate, the importance, or the efficacy of when we have those really strong natal chart conditions, how far and how much success we can achieve. And if we don't, there's still the capacity to get the auspicious alignments from our transiting conditions in terms of our solar return charts each year, which provide unique circumstances that are different, that are not necessarily provided in the natal chart. But there does need to be a connection between solar return charts, and the natal chart. There needs to be some kind of repetition or connection in order to activate the topics, in order to really water the garden that we were gifted when we were born. So thank you for listening, and I will be back again soon.